Let's reflect a bit more now on that speech by the Prime Minister on Friday. Less the politics, but more what it says about modern Britain. I'm joined by the cultural commentator and filmmaker Sarfraz Manzoor. Good morning, Sarfraz.
Hi, good morning.
Normally at this time of the year, we'd be crawling all over every aspect of the budget. But the heat in politics over the last couple of weeks has really been on what people call identity issues, Israel, Gaza, anti-Semitism, all of that. Do you think there's been something new introduced into politics?
Yeah, and I don't think it's just about the last couple of months. I think it's something that's been going on for a few years. I think part of it is that, some of the certainties that we grew up with, and which is certainly I grew up with, in this country over the last few decades, I just feel like they've started to crumble more recently. I just want to give you some, maybe 4 examples. When I was growing up, for example, there was a certainty that if you were a white man, you were basically entitled to run and rule everything. There was a certainty that the empire was a good thing and that nobody would ever question how and why Britain became the country it was. There were certainties around gender definition. And on the other side, there was a certainty that if you were a person of color, the dominant experience of your life was going to be racism, and it was going to limit how you lived and what you could get on with. I think all these certainties have crumbled, even in my lifetime, and political parties weren't really designed to kind of discuss these sorts of things. They were designed to talk about power and to talk about class. And I think that disconnect between trying to work out what we are now, given these crumbling certainties, with political parties who don't really know how to talk about it, I think that partly explains why, as you talk about, identity and culture have become such predominant issues.
I mean, it is a remarkable feature that on this programme, when we try to talk to people about, these questions of anti-Semitism or identity and so on, it's quite interesting how, if you like, reserved politicians become. Their language gets very sort of defensive and so on. Do you think that we've got a system that can sort of adapt to some of these new realities? Is it just a phase, or have we got to think differently about politics now?
I mean, I think part of it is about who is speaking about this and whether they lack conviction and clarity. So you were talking to earlier on about Sunak's speech, and what really struck me was that it felt like it was something born from calculation and cynicism rather than conviction. And I think at the moment we have too many politicians, and I say this on both sides, who seem more comfortable in banalities and fudges and and sort of spouting pieties, rather than actually speaking with conviction. And therefore, if you don't have people who can speak with clarity and with nuance, then I think that this territory gets surrendered to people who do speak with conviction, even if what they're saying is absolute nonsense. The other part of it is, how can you talk about issues without it seeming like you're undermining the subject? So it should be possible to talk about the challenges that come with multiculturalism, for example, without it seeming like you're being malevolent and malign about the notion of it. So I think that's the challenge. And frankly, you said before that you found it hard for politicians to talk about it, because you have to be brave, and why would you be brave when there may be votes that you could be losing as a result of that bravery?
You don't want to, by the way, expand at all on the phrase absolute nonsense, do you, this morning?
I mean, where do you start? I mean, I just thought, if Mr. Sunak actually had any courage, if he actually meant what he was doing rather than just making it about political theatre, never mind Lee Anderson, who's, he's sort of, he's more of a TV show presenter come politician rather than the other way around, maybe. But, when you've got Liz Truss saying that potentially a jihadist party was going to win in Rochdale, I would have respected him so much if he'd called that out. That would have meant that he actually believed it. And the irony about this is that he's got an amazing story he could be telling about Britain, but I don't think he told it.
I am bound to say, and I think it's fair to say this, that neither Lee Anderson nor Liz Truss is on the programme this morning. Though, by the way, Liz, if you want to come on, There's Next Week, always. And I
I think it's
imagine they
because you
would
don't have a
both say
far-right podcast.
they
I
would both
think
say
if you
that
had a
you slightly
far-right podcast,
misunderstood
you'd be
their
on.
intent.
No, I was just going to say, I think if you had a far-right podcast, you'd probably have more chance of Liz Truss coming on.
Okay, she's not. So no, all of the people you've mentioned are not here to answer, but I hope that at some point they will come on to do so. I mean, part of the issue here, actually, you're a sort of specialist in this, is an issue of language. I think one of the reasons that people are so tentative and fearful is that it's quite difficult to summon up language which is in a sense unambiguous, because you may say something. I mean, I've had this experience myself, and you mean X, but everybody else reads Y and Z. Is there a problem here that we just don't have the language to deal with these issues in a sort of grown-up way?
It's an interesting one, because I think the thing with language is often about intention as well, isn't it? So, you'll know this. It's like people can say things they mean well, but they may not use the right language. And I think the problem actually is not necessarily language. It's about having a shared faith and confidence that we agree on certain things. So, for example, if we basically agree on things, but then we are being candid friends and we want to sort of highlight something and then we use language, that should be okay. But I think we're currently in a state where people doubt the motives of what people are saying too often. And therefore we read too much more into language. And so therefore that makes it mean that nobody feels, or people feel lacking in confidence of being able to say something because they worry that the intention is lost because they've chosen the wrong word. So in a way, for me, it's not so much about language. It's about whether we trust the intention behind what the person is saying.